In this video, I'm going to demonstrate a couple of features of Excel that I use all the time when building spreadsheets, and I use these to make the spreadsheets easier to use for the users to use, but I also use this to make it easier for me to debug spreadsheets. So these two features are named ranges and Excel styles. So we'll start with some styles and then we'll use the named ranges. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to calculate the present value of a cash flow. So something simple that we can do. So we're going to have several inputs. We've got the cash flow, we've got the time when it's going to be paid, and we're going to have, let's make it a semi-annual interest rate. Okay, so those are our data. Now the first thing I'm going to use here are some styles. So the styles can be accessed in the home ribbon. So we're in the home ribbon, and you can see this styles section up here. And I clicked on the drop down to expand this out just here. And what you see is a bunch of different styles. Now I don't use all of these by any stretch. I try to actually minimize the number of styles I use. Primarily, I want my spreadsheets, I don't want, in my spreadsheets at least, lots and lots of different colors and whatever. I want them to be relatively straightforward. If you look at my spreadsheet, you know what you're supposed to type, you can read the text, you know where your output is, and so on. So the styles I use very regularly. I use the calculation style for calculations. I use the input style for something which is an input. Those are not inputs. Sometimes I use the note style when I'm leaving a note to the user, just telling them what to do. Sometimes I use some explanatory text to explain something, usually pretty brief. I use the output style. I also use the various heading styles depending on what my text is meant to be. I tend to use the heading 2 style. Seems a reasonable size. Heading 1 for me is a little big. Heading 3 is a little small. If I'm trying to differentiate between different headings, I might use different things here. But typically, if I'm just building a spreadsheet, I'm going to use heading 2. I will also sometimes use these number formats. Very often, the currency and the currency 0, and that's just because Excel has gone through the trouble of setting up these formats for me. And they're a little bit of a pain, a little bit finicky to set up, so I use these sometimes. Okay, so these are things we're supposed to read, so I'm going to set those up with a heading 2 style. I'm going to make my column width big enough so I can read everything, and I tend to go a little bit bigger, right? So if I double click on this, I get exactly enough space. I tend to go a little bit bigger primarily because these fonts differ really between Windows machines and Macs. And so if you're pulling this up on a Mac, if I build this spreadsheet and give it to you and you pull it up on a Mac, then it's going to look a little bit different. And I'm not sure which way it goes, but this might be a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. So I give myself some extra space. All right. The cash flow, let's do $100,000. The time 1, I guess I should say what this means. So we'll do year or years. This would be a good place for some explanatory text, so we know what that is. Semi-annual rate, 5%. So there's my inputs. I am going to tell my user those are inputs by formatting those with the input style. Here's a good place for that currency style, currency 0, or maybe currency. Currency has 2 decimal places. There we go. So that's really a choice here. Let's go for currency. There we go. Okay, so there's my style. So here are my inputs. Now I'm going to calculate the present value. Again, heading 2. This is an output. Equals, and so the semi-annual interest rate, $100,000 divided by 1 plus the rate divided by 2 to the power 2 times time. Simple formula. There's my present value. We're all good. All right, I change things around. Changes my present value. Again, I probably want to make sure this is formatted currency, currency 0, currency, whichever. Depends what I want to show. Okay, so those are my styles. Periodically in these styles, I will change them. So again, I bring them up. And let's go to that input style, for example. I can modify that if I choose. Let's do something silly to it. So basically, this style affects the font, the border, and the fill. It doesn't affect the number formatting, the alignment, or the protection. So if you apply the style, it will change these, but not this first three. And let's change the fill for something. Let's make it a bright yellow. Okay, so now you got something a little bit strange here. This first one didn't update. These other two did. What's going on? Excel will only remember the last style you applied. And since the last style I applied here was currency 0, that's what it remembers. It doesn't remember the yellow. So I have to reformat it with the input style. In theory, as long as I format things with just one style, and so sometimes I don't use those number formats because of this, but as long as I format everything with one style, we should be fine. When I update the style, it updates what those numbers look like in the spreadsheet. Go back. I'm used to my little orange. Now, the one style we haven't used here is the calculation, so I'm going to add discount factor. The discount factor is the present value of $1, so that's heading 2. This is going to be a calculation. It's nice to know 1 divided by 1 plus, the present value of $1 is 1 divided by 1 plus the rate divided by 2 to the power 2 times maturity. So it's just the present value of $1. I'm going to set the number formatting to number with, let's say, 8 decimal places. In the present value, I can simplify a little bit. I just do multiply by the discount factor. Okay, so there we go. That styles, this I use all the time. If you bring up any of my spreadsheets, you're going to see a spreadsheet that kind of looks like this, right? Got inputs, got calculations. Calculations are things you could look at if you're interested, but you can ignore if you're not. Output, what you're supposed to look at. So any of my spreadsheets you pull up, you're going to see something like this. Now, the other thing I want to talk about in this video are named ranges. So let's look at these formulas for a second. Here's this formula. Let's make it bigger. 1 divided by 1 plus B3 divided by 2 to the power 2 times B2. Well, that's great. It's a formula. And given that everything is sitting right here, I know what's going on. So let's change things up a little bit here. Let's go to sheet 3. Let's put these calculations here. Now it says 1 divided by 1 plus sheet 1 exclamation point B3 divided by 2 to the power 2 times sheet 1 exclamation point B2. Pretty confident these formulas work, but what if there's a mistake? If there's a mistake, I now need to start looking. Okay, those are sheet 1 B3. Let's see what that is. Well, that's the semi-annual interest rate. Sheet 1 B2, that's the time, and so on. So I've got to do some work in order to figure out what's going on. I'm going to bring these back for a second so we can more easily work. I solve this using named ranges. In this case, it's fairly simple. I'm going to name some ranges. I'm going to name this one cash flow, the next one maturity or time, the next one rate. And then I can use those names in my formula rather than the cell references. And this is super powerful. Now, there's a bunch of ways to name ranges. I've got my favorite, which is the shortcut Control F3. I've been doing this for long enough that I've memorized the shortcut. You can also type a name up in here. This is called the name box. I've made it pop up there. So that's the name box. You can type a name there. I don't recommend that approach. If you mistype the name, you've named that cell whatever you mistyped. The last two ways, we can go to the formula ribbon, click on the name manager, that's that Control F3, or we can click on define name. So completely up to you how you want to get there. Like I said, for me, Control F3 is how I do it. So Control F3 brings up the name manager. We can edit, we can delete, we can set up new ones. So I'm going to set up a new one for Windows users, Alt N, and we're going to call this cash flow. And that's sheet 1 B1. Okay, and I'm going to go through. Let's name this one. And time, close. Last one here is going to be Alt N, rate. Okay. Close. We've named all those 3 cells. So we've defined, let's define this one just for fun. We're going to name this one discount factor. In fact, let's make it easy. DF for discount factor. Okay. Okay, there we go. So the present value, right now we've got the present value is sheet 1 B1 times B5. That's also known as cash flow times discount factor. Now I can read my formula. What's the discount factor? 1 divided by 1 plus the rate divided by 2 to the power 2 times time. Oops, forgot my equal sign, didn't I? Here's my formula. 1 divided by 1 plus rate divided by 2 to the power 2 time. Present value, cash flow times discount factor. Okay, so that's easy. And the point is, this formula and this formula are really straightforward to read. If I put them on a different page, they're still really straightforward to read. They're read exactly the same. If there's a mistake in one of these formulas, it's easier to find because I don't have cell references. I have names, so I know what the variable is. And this makes a huge difference in lots of spreadsheets. It also means that if I move things around, things stay the same and so on. So it just makes my spreadsheet easier to work with. And one of the keys here, of course, is have names that mean something, right? Cash flow, that's the cash flow. Time, rate. Now, sometimes we're going to make mistakes. Control F3 brings up the name manager. We can edit these things. We can change them. We can edit, for example, DF, change the name of it, change what it refers to, and so on. The other nice feature is we can go to a named range. So now I'm on sheet 3 and I go F5 for go to or Control G for go to. Let's do F5 because that's another shortcut I know. And you can see I can choose one of these names, rate. Takes me to rate. So I can use the named ranges to help me navigate in my spreadsheet as well. So I can find things. All right, I'm looking at my formula and going, what's time? Oh, let's go look. F5, time. There we are. Okay, I hope that's a good introduction into these two features. I will use them over and over again. They show up in every one of my spreadsheets, every spreadsheet I've ever built. Well, not every that I've ever built. Every spreadsheet that I've built since these features existed. Before that, I used to try to use them. The named ranges have existed for a long, long time, but the styles didn't exist. I find the styles really helpful just to simply make myself consistent.